Hey guys, this is Tauna, and today we're going to be talking about all the chase and best cards from the upcoming Avatar set. Personally, I am incredibly excited about this set, and there is a lot of cards in here that for various different reasons people are going to be chasing, whether that's how they look, the actual card's power, or just how interesting the card is, right? Like, it might not even be the most powerful for potential commander or something, but it's just very interesting, which is really great, and I really love that about this set. I'm going to be covering this so much for this set. I'm going to be streaming later on as well, some early access as well, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel so you can see that when it goes live. If you are going to be picking up any of these cards and you're in the US, make sure you head on over to Manipool to pick these up. These guys are absolutely amazing. I went on a call with them to kind of finalize the deals of becoming like an affiliate and stuff, and they are just really great. There's a whole bunch of great benefits for them that you can see up on the screen right there. And if you are heading on to a pre-release, I actually did a really different video for myself, like fully edited video around the pre-release that you guys can check out there, and I'll put the link down to that up on the screen or somewhere at the moment. All right, so let's go through. First of all, we're going to start with the chase treatments. So these are, normal cards from the set, but they're going to be fancier versions of them that you're able to get. The first one here is obviously going to be our big headliner Aang. This is the main card from the set and everything like that. The card that the whole set's kind of revolved around, and this is Aang from the end of book 3, the very ending kind of, final battle kind of thing. So it's Avatar Aang there, and then you've got Aang Master of Elements there. I'm not going to talk too much about the card's power because we'll talk about the actual card later on, but this is the big headliner version of it that you can get from the collector boosters that has, the special foiling and everything, and, it just looks absolutely stunning. We've got the scene cards as well. The first one here is the end of book 1 with the Fire Nation going and attacking the Northern Water Tribe there. Now, there is this card here. And in each of them, in fact, there's actually an Aang that is a part of it that is a flip card. Now, in this version of it, the Book 1 one, the Aang version of it doesn't really fit the actual picture very well, but if you flip it over to Aang and La, Ocean's Fury, it is incredible. Yeah, so this is showing, the big kind of final battle there. We've got this one here, which is the final battle from Book 2 with Azula, Zuko, Katara, Aang, and this Aang here fits well on both sides. If you flip it over, he's gone into the Avatar state and stuff. We've got Combustion Technique up there, and then the Dali agents over here. And you can see, the big kind of battle happening and how it fits well together. It's absolutely stunning. And then to be even more stunning, we've got this one. This one here is the end of book 3, the ending of the actual, full series there, showing Aang up the top there. And again, this Aang here is a flip Aang, and that's the Avatar Aang, again, the headliner version of it. So that's the second version of it. There's a normal version as well. You've got Ozai, you've got Azula, you've got Zuko, you've got the last Agni Kai happening down here. And if you put them all together, it's forming just, a big, really amazingly stylized version of that big final battle, and I love it. So these ones are going to be chasers just because people love scene cards, especially when you do fit them all well together like this, and the art looks absolutely stunning from them, as well as the cards are all kind of decently usable as well, right? Like, there's a mix of rares and mythics throughout here. All right, and then there's also these ones here. So this is the other version of Aang that from the first scene card. Aang Swing Savior then flips into the Aang and La. And then Aang and La, I think it was. And then you've got Zuko, Katara, and Toph the First Metalbender. These are all neon art, and again, these ones are only collector booster exclusive. These ones here you can get in, any boosters. They're not collector booster exclusive, but the neon one and the special Aang that I talked about at the very start there are collector booster exclusive. So, these are pretty good. Personally, I'm not a big fan of textless cards just because I like to be able to see what the card does in front of me, especially because I play with newer players and stuff like that, be able to say what it is easily without having to have a different copy of it. But they do look stunning, right? All right, next up are the chase cards. So these are the cards that people are actually going to be chasing because of most likely either their power or how interesting they are. I've shown like the alternate arts for them as well here. So the first one here is Avatar Aang. Now, the reason that people are going to be chasing this one is just because it is a 5-color commander that can use all of the different set mechanics and everything like that, right? So he cares about water bending, earth bending, fire bending, and air bending. Once you flip him over as well, he is incredibly powerful because you've got this spells you cast cost that much to cast, but then if you combine it with like one of the things that makes it so that, you know, spells only cost one of each color, then it's just, you know, you can cast everything for free. It's basically omniscience with extra steps. So, you know, people are going to be chasing this just because it's a 5-color commander. You can combine all the different cards from throughout the set with this Aang as a commander. But personally, I don't know. I don't find it super interesting because of the fact that it's just kind of like, you know, here's everything. But if you are that kind of like, you know, if you're wanting to make an avatar deck that includes all the different avatar characters, this is definitely, you know, a card that you can use for that. We've got the Badger Mole Cub one. This one here is up here because of strength, in my opinion. So when it enters, it's Earthbend 1. However, it makes it so whenever you tap a creature for mana and an additional green. Now, obviously this is designed around using Earthbending, and then your Earthbended lands are creatures, so you tap them, and boom, you get extra mana. However, in like a, you know, mana dork deck, this is going to be absolutely bonkers. It's just going to ramp you. It only costs 2. It's going to be immediately available to use it on at least one creature with this. You've got, you know, it's a 2/2, which isn't too bad. Like, you know, it's not going to survive all that much, but it will survive, you know, that little, what kind of, like the 1/1s going around and stuff. So personally, I think this one here is definitely going to be a chase because of its power. I think that in a lot of decks, it's going to be quite powerful if you have, you know, either a bunch of mana dorks or you're animating your lands or whatever you're going to be doing with it. All right, we've got Code the Face Stealer. This one here is in here because of being interesting. When it enters, you can exile up to 1 target creature, and then whenever a non-token creature dies, you may exile it. You don't have to, but you may, and that includes opponents, right? You can exile your opponent's stuff. So then you can pay 1 life and choose a creature card exiled with him, and he's going to have all the activated and triggered abilities of that last chosen card. Now, keep in mind, this does not get around like once per turn things because he doesn't gain those abilities. He just has those abilities. So if you already had them, then you give them to him again. He's still got them, and he's not going to, you know, be able to use them again or anything like that, as far as I'm aware. However, you know, there's still a whole bunch of really powerful stuff that you can potentially do with this, essentially allowing you to be able to have any activated or triggered abilities on him, whether he's a commander or whether he's like, you know, a combo piece that you could potentially use, or even like a anti-graveyard, anti-sacrifice kind of, you know, piece that you can use against your opponents, right? Like you can use this to stop your opponents from being able to do stuff. We've got the Legend of Kuruk and Avatar Kuruk. One, I just think this one's quite powerful. So you pay 4, you're going to scry 2, then draw a card. Scry 2, then draw a card. That's perfectly fine. Then you're going to flip him over, and then he is going to have Waterbend 20, which is quite a lot of mana. But you could potentially easily reach that. And there's a bunch of ways to reduce that or to be able to get that mana easily. Take an extra turn after this one. Now, the reason that this is incredibly powerful is because you could clone him when he's on the other side, and then you get a new instance of this Waterbend 20. This exhaust is more of like a suggestion rather than an actual restriction, because there is just so many different ways for you to be able to bypass this and be able to get that exhaust ability multiple times to be able to take a whole bunch of turns. I would not be surprised if there isn't some kind of infinite that you could potentially do with this. You know, flicker him and then flip him over and then, you know, get to this stage again. You know, I'm pretty sure that there's ways to be able to do that easily. And as well as, you know, you get the little 1/1s per turn each time you cast a spell, which I think are nice when you can kind of, you know, if you build them up bigger, you could use them to waterbend as well. You know, I just think that this is quite a powerful card depending on what your deck is and if your deck can make use of it really well. We got the Walls of Bussing Say. This one here is just because of memes. People are going to want this because of how memey funny it is. You've literally got the walls of the city. It can't do shit, which is just, you know, very flavorful because in the actual series, the Balls of Bussing Say did really nothing. But it does give everything indestructible, which is nice. But I can see people using this as a commander, building it up as a commander just for, you know, funny meme time, or to put it in like, you know, their big butts deck, right? You've got this 0/30 that now becomes a 30/30, well, essentially 30/30, dealing 30 damage whenever it attacks, as well as giving everything indestructible. I need this for my, you know, my tree deck potentially. We got Wan Shi Tong. I probably butchered that again. I apologize. Librarian. This is, I really like this one. So, I'm saying that about a lot of cards because I really like this set, but yeah, I'm probably biased because I think this one is really great too. Okay, you can flash it in to start off with. Whenever an opponent searches their library, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. That overall is just really nice, but you can also cast it for not flash, or you can cast it for flash on someone else's turn and put in a whole bunch of mana into it, and then you draw cards from it as well. You draw half X cards, and you put X +1/+1 counters on him. I just personally think that that's really, really great. I think that, as well as the fact that he's a flying vigilance bird spirit, that's really cool. Yeah, I can see this one being quite powerful. Just being able to, whenever an opponent searches the deck, is, you know, especially in higher tiers of, you know, like bracket 4, potentially even bracket 5, people are going to be searching their decks a bunch. There's also already like the Archivist of Ogmar, I think it is, that already does something very similar to this. But this one here is going to also be able to, you know, be able to cast and stuff. So it's quite powerful, especially because it's also blue rather than white too. We've got Aang at the Crossroads. So this one here is the rare version of Aang, getting down into the rares. But I think this one could potentially be sought after because of, like, you know, his front side more. Whenever he enters, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, you put a creature card with mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield, and then put the rest into the onto the bottom of your library in a random order. But the fact that he can be flickered means that you could potentially do this repeatedly, right? Repeatedly. Now, on his other side, he's going to be able to give your land creatures vigilance, and he gets to Earthbend 2 at the start of combat, which is nice. And if you've got other Earthbend stuff in there as well, if you want to run it that way, sure, that's good. But even on this front side here, just being able to play him, then cheat something in that's mana value 4 or greater, I think is decent when you can potentially repeatedly do that and repeatedly be able to allow him to, like, you know, keep getting that trigger constantly. We've got Elemental Teachings. So there is already a card that's very similar to this, Realms Uncharted. But this one here, you search up your library for up to 4 land cards with different names and reveal them. So you can search any lands. You're going to choose, an opponent is going to choose 2 of those, and then you're going to put them onto the battlefield tapped, right? They're going onto the battlefield tapped, and then the other 2 will go into your graveyard. Sorry, the 2 that the opponent chose go into your graveyard, the rest go into your hand. So being able to just use this to ramp up any lands you like is great, as well as the fact that it is instant speed too. So, like, you're just going to be able to really, really ramp up and get, as I said, you know, any lands, like your triomes, or, you know, whatever color fixing cards you need to. As well as, there are so many decks that make use of lands in the graveyard, right? Like, I'm going to be combining my Yuma and my Lord Windgrace deck soon, and this is going to go straight into that. We got the Fire Lord Azula. So, alright, so this one here, I will say, is quite powerful. I do think that she is quite strong because anytime you cast a spell whenever she's attacking, it doesn't even need to be an instant, a sorcery or anything. If you flash something in, flash a creature in, flash anything in, boom. As well as the fact that she's giving you that firebending mana to be able to enable you to do that. But she's also going to be very sought after because it's Azula. People love Azula. She is absolutely batshit bonkers, and people love that about her, as well as the art is absolutely stunning. There's 3 different versions of her. There's this version here with her charging with the lightning flame. You've got, you know, the neon, well, it's not neon, sorry, the battle pose one there, and then we saw the one before from the scene art. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain why Azula is going to be sought after. We've got the Great Divide Guide. I think people really miss this one because I think that this is potentially quite strong. You know, Chromatic Lantern, those kinds of cards are really important to certain decks, and this is going to allow you to do that. I think if you look at it and you're like, each land and ally you control has this. If you look at that and ally, people will think, oh, I need to have, you know, allies to be able to use it, right? You don't. You can just use this in a lands deck that's 5 color and you just want to mana fix yourself. However, he does allows himself, like, because it's not each other, to tap for mana. So boom, you've got a mana door coming out that also will allow all your other stuff, right? Like, what's that? Chromatic Lantern? It's essentially Chromatic Lantern. If you look at Chromatic Lantern, in fact, I think this is even cheaper than Chromatic Lantern because Chromatic Lantern's 3, yeah. The only difference is this can't tap the turn it comes out, while Chromatic Lantern can. As well as being a creature, so it's more susceptible to removal, I guess. Redirect Lightning. Redirect spells are really strong. This one here also lets you pay life to potentially do it. So in something like, you know, CEDH that you care less about your life because things are just going to be either you're dead or not, or like, you know, just a deck that doesn't matter if you kind of lose a bit of life. This is going to be great because you can just redirect, you know, any targeted spell or ability with a single target. So you can redirect something to something else. Last, Agni Kai. Oh, I love this card so much. Target creature you control fights target creature an opponent controls. If the creature an opponent controls is dealt excess damage this way, add that much red mana. There are a huge amount of uses for this. It's a removal spell that also gives you extra mana, and then you don't lose unspent red mana as well, so you can potentially make use of any firebending mana that you've got. But even outside of firebending mana, I think that personally this has become an incredible fight spell. It's not a bite spell, unfortunately, which would have been great, which means that you deal damage, but they don't deal damage to you. But depending on what your creatures are, you know, you're in red. Let's say you're in Gruul. You're going to have big creatures. This is just a great kind of pew pew. Your creature's dead. I'm getting some mana, and I'm going to be able to spend that mana later on. We got Toph, the first Metal Bender. Everyone, once they saw her, have been building this. This is a very, very interesting deck, making all your non-token artifacts into lands, which means, you know, your, let's say, Chromatic Lantern, you can earthbend your Chromatic Lantern, and now if your Chromatic Lantern dies, it's gone away, and then comes back as a, you know, just as a normal Chromatic Lantern. Well, it's still a land, I guess. However, the real broken part about this is when you add in stuff like Mind Slavers or Ugin's Nexus or stuff like that should go to the battle, should go to the graveyard and should be gone, but then you bring it back. Now, I'm personally going to be building mine as vehicles because I love vehicles and I think vehicles are amazing. But I know people aren't going to, and I think it's probably better not to, but still, I love vehicles, so I'm going to be definitely seeking after her. All right, now the source material ones. I know what you're saying. Ugh, no one wants these source material ones. People will still want them because they are still strong cards and they're still going to be relatively cheap because of the fact no one likes them. So you've got Teferi's Protection. Yeah, everyone wants it. We've got Mystic Remora, a very, very great card, very sought after, used a lot. We've got Force of Negation, a counterspell that doesn't require mana cost, is always going to be sought after. Cruel Tutor. This one here is in here because of the art. The other ones were because of how powerful the art. This is because of the art, because I know that people are going to want this because of the art, because it's just so memey. Why is it a close-in face? Why? We've got the Bayan tree here, the Great Henge, you know, incredibly powerful card again. And then Sakashima, again, incredibly powerful card. So, you know, people might not want them because of the art, but they're still strong cards that you can potentially pick up relatively cheap because no one wants them because of the art. Blood Chief Ascension as well. All right, into the Jumpstart Chasers. Now, these are from the Jumpstart. However, you get them from the Collector Boosters as well. That's important to note. They can come in the Collector Boosters at, you know, in the extended art version that I'll show you here. We've got Avatar Kyoshi. At the beginning of combat, Earthbend 8, then untap that land. That's really powerful. If you're in an Earthbend or Lands Matter deck, or even, you know, she's going to be, you're paying 8, and then on the turn that she comes out, let's say you put her in the first main phase 1, you pay 8, she's going to create an 8/8. Then she will create another 8/8 next turn. And each turn, she's just pumping out 8/8s. That's just really strong, as well as she's got hexproof on your turn. We've got Heibai Forest Guardian. Now, this is one that I'm actually considering building because I just love the idea of it. I love shrines, but I'm going to be building it as shrines and spirits together because I think that's a very interesting idea. You know, a nice new shrine commander that's not Goshintai, I think is going to be really well sought after. We've got the other version of Way of Xingtong, all-knowing this time around. This one here cares about cards being put into the library from anywhere. So, like, you know, the Chaos Warpy kind of cards, or, you know, the Tuck cards where, you know, target opponent puts the card on the top of their library, or third from the top on the top of their library and stuff. Essentially, that's what you're going to be doing with this deck. And, you know, it's going to potentially be, you know, a very interesting and very, you know, sought after card because of that. We've got Katara, Waterbending Master. Now, I didn't include all of the different master cards that care about experience because I don't think that they're all very powerful or very sought after, but I do think this Katara one will be, because of the fact that she will just generate a huge amount of card draw. Whenever you cast a spell during an opponent's turn, you get an experience counter. You don't necessarily need to be in an experience counter matters deck. However, if you are, you're going to be able to get more. But if you got Proliferate and stuff like that, you're going to be drawing a whole bunch of cards. Then you need to discard one card, as long as you can get an attack in with her. But that, you know, that's potentially not too hard if you got a way to give her evasion in somehow. We've got Chakra Meditation. I like this one a lot. I think it's going to be quite strong. Whenever it enters, return up to one target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, draw a card, then discard a card unless there's 3 or more. So each time you cast an instant or sorcery, you're looting. I think that that's going to be... Like, my brother has an Ovika deck, and I really hope that he doesn't see this card. The Cabbage Merchant. Yeah. Not only... So, I know that, you know... I'm talking about the Cabbage Merchant. I think that he's got great meme potential. He's a very fun card. I've literally built a very, very expensive and very strong Cabbage Merchant deck myself. However, he is essentially kind of like a half Smothering Tithe kind of thing. Not Smothering Tithe. Like, yeah, kind of like a half Smothering Tithe. Because whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, create a food, and then 2 foods will tap for 1 mana. So you're going to be able to generate a huge amount of mana from this very, very easily. As long as you don't take combat damage, but there's ways to avoid that pretty easily. We've got Waterbender's Restoration. I love this one because, so you're paying 2 blue, and then you... As an additional cost to this, you're going to Waterbend X. Now, you can pay that with mana, or you can tap things for it. And then you're going to exile target creatures, exile X target creatures you control. So you're going to essentially kind of flicker your cards out, right? They all get exiled, then they'll come back at their under your under their owner's control at the beginning at the next end step, right? The beginning of the next end step. But you can use it to protect your board really easily, but you can waterbend the cards that you're about to flicker, and then they're gone, and they'll come back, and they'll be untapped when they come back. I think that that's really great, a really great evasion spell. All right, now the Commander Bundle, in this, you're going to get 3 guaranteed special promos, but there is a choice of, I think it's 12 different other ones that you can potentially get for 2 other slots. So you get 2 of 12 other ones, right? But there are some insane ones. Deflecting Swat's in there. We've got Fierce Guardianship. We've got Deadly Rollick. We've got Enlightened Tutor. All of those are very powerful cards that are going to be sought after from this, as well as the fact that, you know, they've got the special art. I need this Deflecting Swat so much. I love Zuko. He's an amazing card. Like, I'm literally wearing a Zuko top. And having this card is like, you know, it's my chase, I think, for the set. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys as to what you think. What cards are you going to be chasing? Are you, you know, even interested in the Avatar set? Let me know. Hope you guys had a wonderful day and goodbye.